And it had nothing to do with skill or courage or experience or any of those things. It was just plain sheer luck. If we were found, we had no chance of survival. If we were not found, we survived.
I've thought about it 10,000 times, and I think about it right now. And I think of it, did I make a mistake? I don't know, but I just don't know why I missed whatever it was. I missed it. I don't. The HMCS Esquimalt is the last Canadian ship that was sunk during the war. Myself, I'm a survivor of the ship. And now I ended up being the last survivor. The rest of my buddies and shipmates have now passed away.
On April the 14th, Sarnia, my ship, and Esquimalt were called in to say we were going to sail on April the 15th, 0800, and that we would patrol 2 areas. There's supposed to be a convoy that was going to come out that morning, and we wanted to sweep the channel ahead of the convoy, and we'd do it together. Search and destroy. That's what our job was.
I had no interest in U-boats. I had read too many books about these iron coffins below the surface, and that was not what I was after. But submarines was the only branch that grew and for which crew members were needed, so I was told that's where you go. We had 40,000 German submariners, 30,000 died.
Listening for submarines. That's what my job was. ASDIC is a system whereas it sends out a pulse into the water. You had headphones on one in each ear, and you're listening for the pulse that you've sent out to come back as an echo. And it's like it's just a pulse. When it comes back to you as an echo, that's when you know that you've hit something or you're hitting something.
U-190 was on its last patrol. Our destination was the approaches of Halifax, where another submarine had been quite successful earlier on. And so our task, of course, was there to sink cargo ships, and we didn't find any. We stayed around the approaches of Halifax, submerged.
Your beam is focused on an object. That object could be a whale, it could be a school of fish. But of course, we were looking for a submarine, and that's what it was all about. And that was the hardest thing to do, was to be positive, because you only see one positive echo in your life, more or less.
So you got all this thing going on in your mind. What happens if a torpedo hits us? Because, you know, those little minesweepers there, you know, they get hit in the middle with a torpedo. They're gone. They're gone.
History Hit is a streaming platform that is just for history fans, with fantastic documentaries covering fascinating figures and moments in history from all over the world. From the Battle of Trafalgar and the Revolutionary era, right through to the Second World War. If you are looking for your next military history fix, then this is the service for you. We're committed to bringing history fans award-winning documentaries and podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. Sign up now for a free trial, and War Stories fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code WARSTORIES at checkout.
April 16, 1945, we were submerged at our normal depth, over 60 meters. And all of a sudden we heard the pinging sound of an ASDIC device, which obviously had found us.
I heard an echo. I picked it up on one of the sweeps and classified it as submarine, and they said, from the bridge, they said disregard, which it did, which meant I forget about it, because they said, it's the light ship. Well, that's good enough. Disregard.
So we were quite sure that we had now been discovered for the first time since we were there. And we came to the surface and looked through the periscope, and there we saw a small warship approaching us from behind at high speed.
They heard our transmission. So to them, we'd detected it. Well, we hadn't detected it.
We assumed at that time that that ship had discovered us and was now in the process of attacking us. And to defend ourselves, we then sent out one acoustic torpedo.
So when the torpedo hit, it was just a thump. And my set went dead. And I put my head outside and I said, I think we've been hit, sir. And then you could feel the ship moving, and it was starting to sink that fast. So when the captain got to the bridge, he only took one look and said, abandon ship. So he said, abandon ship, and myself, a signalman, and while other people are around, we all went over the side into the water. So when Captain Robert McMillan got to the bridge, he only took one look and said, abandon ship. He had to go. Well, I never even thought about it. And it was between me and the waterway was nothing, and I just jumped in. Captain McMillan didn't send a distress signal before the ship went down because there was no power. He couldn't send a distress signal.
And we saw a plume of smoke go up through the periscope, and at that time we knew we had hit the ship. We listened and heard the noises of a sinking ship. When their compartments collapse, it's quite a distinctive sound.
Well, the ship sunk within 4 minutes after being hit. You could see the whole ship just going straight down. Same as well, if you're playing with a toy in a bathtub, you could make it sink and just, you could see it going from there down to there. When it went underwater, I got tangled up with the wires. I fought my way out of that, and I came back to the surface. When I came to the surface, I came up in a great rush because my lifesaver brought me up. And I was right there alongside my carry float again, so I jumped it back in. I crawled back in on the carry float. And at the same time I was going in, a couple other boys were coming over the other side, and we filled up the carry float with survivors. Most of those men were hanging on the side of the float, which meant they were more submerged than I was. The coldness of the water was so cold that it was, you couldn't live for it, live with it. That's what killed us, killed them.
We snuck into inshore as close as we could get, and laid down on the ground there. We put our boat heavy enough that it settled down on the ground. But we sat for about a day or two and waiting for what would happen. And very little happened, as a matter of fact. It took the Allies about 6 hours to find out that this Esquimalt was gone, and before they even started rescuing efforts.
The signal station in Halifax tried to contact the Esquimalt and could not get an answer. There hadn't been any sinkings around Halifax for some months. So who would determine that the Esquimalt was sunk?
And at 8 o'clock in the morning, I took over from Morris Schonfield. He was the XO. And I said, "Where's the Esquimalt?" He says, "It hasn't shown. We haven't seen it." He said, "I saw it once during the night, during my watch." I then got hold of the captain, and I said, "Esquimalt is not here." The captain came up the bridge, radioed dockyard, and said, "Esquimalt isn't at Seaboy as planned." We were afraid because Esquimalt wasn't there that it had been fished, that it had been torpedoed. That was our buddy. So we were very, very concerned. On my watch, we got a solid contact. I verified that it was a solid contact, moving slightly to the left. I called down the voice pipe for the captain. The captain came up quickly, as soon looked over the situation, and rang action stations. We dropped 2 patterns of depth charges.
That explosion in the water was tremendous, tremendous. It would blow a submarine apart if it got close to it. It would also blow up our ship if it was too close.
And the depth charge has the effect of like a sledgehammer on an immovable object. Anybody who claims he is not afraid in situations like that, in my opinion, is a liar. You are afraid for your life in those sort of things.
When a person passed away, it wasn't too noticeable. Well, when you say slip under the water, you just know that they were there and then they weren't. And they just seemed to slip away. One of my very good friends on board the ship slipped away, and I didn't even notice for a long while that he was gone. They passed away one by one. We started off with 23, I believe it was. There was only 7 of us left. And all of a sudden we heard the roar and, of course, the airplanes. Not very high up. And we waved and screamed and waved our arms and everything else. And it was a hell of a feeling because it just kept on going and disappeared. Where the hell are they going? Why can't they see us?
The tension on the Sarnia was really bad. Everybody was on edge. And at about 12:30, I think it was, our lookouts spotted a life raft approaching a Sambro lightship, which was a navigation ship moored to the bottom of the ocean.
I heard the alarm signal saying that we were picking survivors up. And we've had a scramble net over the side of the ship. Ones that were alive were sitting around the edge of the... Then there was a bunch of dead ones, I don't know how many.
I felt very happy, very elated. It was like being on dry land.
It's not very nice when you see a fella sitting on the edge of a carly float, shivering, because he had no clothes on, shivering like that. You turn around and you do something, and you turn around and he's face down in the water. He passed out. He's gone. His body gave up.
27 survivors, 13 corpses, but 3 were corpses that we had found in the carly floats as the carly floats came in. So another 10 guys that probably were some form of being alive when they came out of the water with our help just gave up fighting and died on their quarterdeck. Terrible.
But I remember when we did get into Halifax, they started to take them off in stretchers. And also, I guess it was my turn because I remember being picked up, and away I went, and I went back sleeping.
About 300 miles south of Newfoundland, we now had left Halifax about a week earlier or something like that. We got a signal from Germany that the war is over and that we were expected to come to the surface, set a black flag, throw our ammunition overboard, and radio in open language to the world who we were and where we were, and wait for further action. The only emotion really was how great that we're still alive and the war is over and there's no more threat and we're not going to die and we're going to be alive. So that really totally governed our entire emotion. Everything else fell by the wayside.
Well, there's no doubt about it. It was the last ship that was sunk during the war, 22 days before the war in Germany was over. Just 22 days. And sometimes you think to yourself, well, wonder why us, or why not somebody else? I've read all sorts of articles about why it happened, why it didn't happen, partially who's to blame and who wasn't to blame. I sat before the Board of Inquiry and gave my information on what I was doing and what I thought at that time, and I still hold up to it. I don't know.
So it was the end of the war. Maybe that was the reason. I don't know. But there are so many misses, so many people that should have done something that weren't there to do something or didn't do something. And I still worry about it.
Well, there's plenty of blame to go around. Take McMillan. He wasn't zigzagging. The coastal patrol aircraft that flew over and saw them and reported them as fishing vessels. The signal station that didn't report that they couldn't raise the Esquimalt for almost 4 hours after it had been sunk. And it all lands on the port commander, who didn't take immediate action. But, you know, there's a lot of blame to go around. And when we sit back 67 years later and try to point fingers, few fingers are pointing back at us.
Joe Wilson always felt that he was partially to blame because he missed the contact of the U-190. And I believe that he sort of worried about that all his life.
I've thought about it 10,000 times, and I think about it right now. And I think of it, did I make a mistake? There was a possibility that it could have been my fault, a possibility that I missed it. I wasn't paying attention, but I know I pay attention continuously. From the minute I got on that set until I come off it, I was paying attention. Because, I don't know, but I just don't know why I missed whatever it was. I missed it. I don't.
I still have a certain amount of animosity toward German people. I can't forget, and I can't forgive.
We didn't see any way out except up the crematorium chimney.
It's the day after D-Day. Hitler's boasted impregnable defenses are rocking under 10,000 tons of bombs. Objective, isolate the battle area until we could consolidate our beachheads and begin the breakthrough. Pinpoint precision, knocking out Nazi rail lines and supply routes. Bombs away.
As they say in the Air Force, we went laughing and scratching.
We were totally prepared to do whatever we had to do, to face whatever we had to face. It was an easy target, so we thought. Small railway yard outside of Paris on June the 7th, 1944.
There was nearly 1,000 aircraft. You had to be careful you didn't run into each other.
It looked like a swarm of bees. We carried 11,000 pounds of bombs. We were successful in reaching our target. I dropped the bombs on time on the target. I laid them right where they were supposed to go.
You're cruising along. The next thing is a big explosion.
The whole aircraft just shook, as if somebody was hitting it with a sledgehammer.
We got hit, and the cannon shells ripped into the port in our engine and ripped right up the fuselage. And the aircraft was actually out of commission.
And I remember sitting there watching these bits of red-hot stuff go through my transmitter and receiver. I remember being most indignant at the Germans for destroying my equipment.
And so we had to bail out. I remember vaguely sitting there, practically frozen in my seat, wondering, how the heck am I going to get out of here? And I don't remember pulling the ripcord. All I can remember is floating down out of the sky with my parachute open. So however that happened, I have no idea.
Three of us escaped. 4 went down in the aircraft. This farmer's assistant came by on his bicycle. I was hidden in a hedge. I went, psst, psst, hey! He nearly wet his French drawers. And I said, I need help.
I found a house in my travels. I watched it for a while. I didn't see any activity. And there was a lady and her daughter out front tending the garden. And I walked up to them and told them who I was.
She ushered me into the house, took me in the kitchen, and she gave me a bowl of hot milk and bread and said, you can't stay here because if the Gestapo find you here, you may not be executed, but we will. And that's the first time I heard the word Gestapo.
We stayed there a fortnight. It was getting a little bit dodgy. Sooner or later, we're going to get rumbled.
Panic set in, and they said, you've got to go. So we made arrangements for some young lad to come tomorrow and take you to a second safe hiding house. So I gave them my uniform, and they gave me civilian clothing.
They asked me where I wanted to go. Either go to Spain or go and fight with the Marquis, the resistance. So I chose to go to Spain. On the 18th of July, I left in a car. I didn't know but that the Gestapo had infiltrated the escape line. And I landed right in it.
A gentleman called Jacques de Soubray, who had infiltrated the resistance. He knew our plan ahead of us before we did. We walked right into their trap.
Somewhere near the Eiffel Tower, we were stopped by a German roadblock.
And immediately 6 or 7 military came over the car, and they opened up the door, and they extracted the 4 of us like sack of potatoes, threw us down the ground, and started to hit us with their rifles and jackboots. And this great big German officer standing over me, and he's got this Luger out, and I stand up in front of him, and he jabs it right between my eyes, and he smashed me over the head, knocked me down the ground, asking me, who are you? I'm a Canadian Airman. Prove it. Well, I don't have my uniform on, but I have my dog tags, which I reveal, bring out. He grabs up and twists them off my neck, threw them away. And the other 3 boys, he removed any form of identification they had. Said, now, prove who you are. You're all spies and saboteurs and will be executed as such.
As soon as we hit the gates of Friends Prison, we knew we were in the bag, as it were. We were classed as terror flyers. The Geneva Convention, they never heard of it, as far as we were concerned.
It was run by the Gestapo. It housed nearly 2,000 French people. Anybody who was against the Nazi regime was thrown in this prison. Men, women, boys, girls. We were subjected to the emotions of listening to people crying, people in agony being tortured by the Gestapo, shots ringing out. We took time between ourselves to keep our sanity. The conditions in that cell was so horrible that emotionally, psychologically, you could break down so easily, not knowing where you are, what's going to happen to you.
One of our fellow prisoners had been a golf professional and an instructor. So there we were with our beds lifted back out of the way while our instructor was refreshing our golf. You can imagine the most peculiar place and time to take golf lessons.
Around the 15th of August, 1944, the guard opened up our door, yelled at us to get out. And milling around the courtyard is where we realized there was nearly these 2,000 French people. But we could hear other people speaking English. How come you speak English? It was then and there that we realized there was 168 Allied airmen. 168 Allied airmen had been betrayed by the same collaborators. So they took us by trucks down to the railway yard in Paris, and there we were introduced to a convoy. They had a convoy of many of these little wee French cattle car. We were jammed in them like sardines.
And away we went to Germany. We'd only been out 2 days from Paris. One of the little kids that was in the car with us stuck his finger out of the window in the boxcar. The guard up on top shot the kid's finger off.
So the German guard ordered him out of the boxcar, made him walk down the embankment, and as he walked down the embankment, he shot him. And the poor kid fell to the ground. He wasn't totally dead, and then somebody else came up behind him and put some more bullets in the back of his head and killed him. And they took 2 of our boys and dug a shallow grave, and they buried him. Then the train took off. After 5 days, the train stops, the doors open, and we're greeted by dozens and dozens of screaming green uniform and black uniform military with dogs and whips, and the doors open, and they pulling people physically out of the boxcars. The Germans are yelling at us and scream to point in certain direction to go to, and it was your advantage to go in that direction, because if not, if you're on the outside of this mass of humanity, the dogs are biting you, the Germans are hitting you with their rifles or their whips. It was total sadism that was taking place at that period of time.
And then they marched us into the camp proper. And we could see these skeletons of guys in striped suits. We started to wonder where we are, and we knew it wasn't a POW camp.
And we thought, holy mackerel, this is a horrible, horrible place. What are we getting into? Nobody knows where we are. We're not under the protection of any Geneva Convention or any other international law. Nobody knows where we are. We're going to die here. Buchenwald was a slave labor camp. There were 2 huge factories within the confines of the perimeter of Buchenwald. So these 45,000 plus slaves were working these factories 10, 12 hours, and then crawl back to their huts and then try to survive. If you couldn't work, you died.
All the time you could smell the stench of burning flesh. You could smell it all over the camp, night and day. I can still smell it. We had an officer with us, Squadron Leader Phil Lammonson, and he took over. Chaps, he said, let's act like soldiers. Somehow, I don't know how we did it.
That was the only thing that kept us going. Bob, our mid-upper gunner, I was sort of looking after Bob.
Why?
He was a bit nervous with the whole concern. I used to get hold of him and cuddle him up at night to get him to sleep. That was the kind of state we were in.
They made room for us in one of the barracks. And how they made room, there was 600 children in one barracks. So they murdered the 600 kids, and we were put in that barracks.
I took sick. I developed pneumonia. And they took me and they put me in a building called the infirmary. And there was all kinds of people in there sick and dying. And I was surrounded by people every day who were dying. And I can still recall the gurgles in their throat before they expired. I can hear them crying out the names of their loved ones before they died. They had roll calls that would last 2 and 3 hours, morning and night. Everybody had to be counted. And while you're standing there, people would collapse around you. And when they broke up the roll call, you walked away from the appel square, and people lying on the ground would be crying, pleading for you to help them. And you, in your mind, you're now an animal. You have no sense of Christian or human feeling toward you. You physically stepped over these people and walked away from them, and they're crying in your ears for help. And this was one of the most difficult things for us to do as human beings.
And the barrow on a couple of motorcycle wheels being pushed through the camp with a pile of semi-naked bodies on it. The crematorium was smoking night and day, with a few odd sparks now and again.
That must have been terrifying.
There's a lot of terrifying things there. I would put that down the waiting list a bit. We didn't see any way out except up the crematorium chimney. SS, they told us, prepared for departing. And they knew we were going. Very simple. Some of us thought, this is a way to get us away from here to the place of execution. Because we were just waiting to be disposed of there.
There was a German Luftwaffe officer came to Buchenwald for whatever reason it was, we're not sure. And one of the slaves in Buchenwald got word to him that there was 168 Allied airmen in Buchenwald. He went back to Berlin with that story, they pursued it, and they found out that we were there, and then that's when they started the wheels of motion to get us out of Buchenwald.
And higher Luftwaffe officers in Berlin decided, hey, let's There's Allied flyers in Buchenwald going to be executed. We better get them out of there.
Miraculously, a German Air Force officer and a couple of his subordinates came to where I was in the infirmary, and we got dressed and we went out and we left Buchenwald. So thankfully they saved us.
Our enemies did save our life. Stella Glove 3. It was a Sunday school picnic compared with Buchenwald. Food was fairly good, Red Cross parcels, able to communicate with my parents at home, send them my first letter.
It was like going into heaven. God's very polite, sheets on our beds, and food, and difficult to believe that there was such a place.
And we were liberated on May the 7th, 1945. And the day that we were liberated, because I was so emotionally, psychologically troubled, I had difficulty to try and join in with the rest of them who were celebrating in the war. I couldn't get that concept into my mind. I couldn't get myself out of this horrible emotional bubble that I was in from my experience of Buchenwald. And then even when I got home, I had trouble because people had difficulty believing me, that I had been a survivor, that I had been in a concentration camp. They would tell me to my face, yeah, sure, Ed, but behind my back, they would say unkind things, that I was sick, that I had an emotional problem, that it was all a figment of my imagination. And so it was very difficult for me to share my story with anybody, which I did for about 40 years, so, and now I'm sharing with you.
Yeah, number 786362, Pearson Frank, survived.